Good morning. Welcome to a UK column interview. I'm Brian Gerrish. I'm delighted to say I'm at home this morning, so I'm going to be doing this interview in a very relaxed style. My guest today is David Kurten, who is the leader of the Heritage Party. And I think this is going to be a very fascinating interview, as I've just shared with David when we were just having a little bit of an informal chat. The UK column has been approached over the last couple of months by a number of people involved with new parties. And we've done a couple of interviews already to date. We're very happy to do more. And what I'm going to try and make sure I do from here on is give everybody a fair crack of the whip. So I'm going to try and judge my questions and how we discuss areas in a way that's going to be fair to the Heritage Party and hopefully to other new parties that would like an interview with the UK column. So, David, having given that little bit of a spiel, welcome to UK column.
Thank you, Brian. Really good to join you on UK column. I love what you do. I don't have time to hear everything you do because you do so much every week. But you put the truth out there, and to me, actually, you're a fantastic source of information about all the things that are going on. So thanks for all you're doing.
So let's start off with you. Tell us about yourself. How did you get involved in all this?
Gosh, I don't know how far to go back. I guess I'd start at the very beginning and just work through because, I was just minding my own business. I was a chemistry teacher for a long time, but I'd always been interested in politics and current affairs and culture and where it was going and so on. And I got actively involved in politics, I guess, about 2012, 2013, around then, because I was really concerned about two big things in particular. One was the European Union and how it was undermining democracy, and also political correctness and how it was undermining freedom and our culture, and just the way that people are able to interact with each other normally, and share a joke and share a bit of banter. So back in the day, at the time, I joined UKIP because it was the only party that was around that seemed to be fighting and campaigning against both those things. Wanted to leave the European Union, but also wanted to allow people the freedom just to carry on speaking as they'd already done, and was against political correctness. So I joined up there, and I stood in my first election in 2015. That was the election that UKIP got. What was it? They got one in every 8 votes, but they only got one seat. So that really wasn't a fair system. But I stood in Camberwell and Peckham against Harriet Harman, who's famous for bringing in the Equality Bill, which is or the Equality Act, which is a complete disaster as well. So I was glad to do that. But then I was selected the next year to stand in the London Assembly elections. And so I was just blessed and fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. I got elected onto the London Assembly, and I was there for 5 years. Soon after I was elected was the referendum. As well, of course, we know the result for that. We voted to leave the European Union. But in terms of politics, UKIP then pretty much collapsed. It started to collapse very, very soon after the referendum. Farage left. There was a leader, another leader, another leader. They've had about 10 leaders in 5 years, and it's just like it's kind of imploded, which was very, very sad because I hoped to help to change UKIP into a proper socially conservative party, which the country needed, but it didn't do that. There was too much infighting. So I left while I was still on the London Assembly, but I was use that time to question Sadiq Khan an awful lot, and because there's a lot to question there. And because I was pretty free to do whatever I wanted, there was no one whipping me, telling me that I couldn't say this, I couldn't say that. I could ask Sadiq Khan all the questions I wanted to ask, and all the questions that everybody else pretty much wanted him to be asked. I could ask him about grooming gangs, for example. Why are you not investigating grooming gangs in London? Why are you putting out tweets about transgenderism? Why are you supporting this and that and the other? And why are you allowing the police to go in and crack down on freedom protesters, but then giving a green pass to Black Lives Matter protests and Muslim celebrations and so on at the same time. I could ask him that, and he didn't have a good answer. So I had a really good run of 5 years in the London Assembly doing that. But at the same time, I was kind of politically homeless as well. So I was independent. But then I started the Heritage Party because I thought, look, I just need to do this and get off my backside and actually start something which I think the country needs, a real socially conservative party. So it was about the start of the lockdown, actually. I started working on it, and we did a lot of background work, getting everything ready, and then launched in September 2020, just around the same time as the big protests in Trafalgar Square were coming out against lockdowns and so on. That's when we launched. So the Heritage Party's been going now 2.5 years, and I'm so happy, that we've been joined by some amazing people, and we're growing. Obviously, we've got elections coming up and so on. So we're just trying to be the party with the policies and principles that the country needs. Just what everyone would have thought was common sense about 30 or 40 years ago. But you always get smeared by the mainstream media and the other parties just for saying simple common sense things like, for example, there's two sexes, male and female. You cannot become a woman if you're a man. All these kind of things that they want to shut you down from saying. So, the world's gone mad, but we're really trying to just turn it the right way up in the political sphere. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're about.
Tell us what the Heritage Party stands for.
Yeah, we have a strap line, which is freedom, family, nation. I think people can remember those three words. And, most of our principles would hang on those things. So we're about restoring freedom, because obviously over the last 3 years, we've seen freedom being absolutely hammered and corroded actively. We've had tyranny in this country in a manner that we couldn't even imagine, 5 years ago. So we're about all kinds of our fundamental freedoms need to be restored and need to be protected. Free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to protest, freedom to trade, freedom to move around your own country if you're a citizen, with which, it speaks into these Agenda 2030 low traffic neighborhoods and 15-minute cities that we've got now. So the basic principle is that we support freedom. Family as well. We're for traditional family values. So this is why we're a socially conservative party. We say, I ask our candidates three things, because there's three fundamental socially conservative positions that we would take. Not everyone agrees with them, but one is that there's two sexes, male and female. You cannot change your sex. So if you want to dress up as the opposite sex, that's fair enough. You can do that, but it doesn't make you actually the opposite sex. So no one should be forced to affirm this. And there shouldn't be anything in law that says you have to recognize this idea of gender, which is different to sex, which is really a social construct that came out of the left field American universities in the 50s and 60s and has just spread around the world through the institution. So that's one of our principles, if you like, and our policies would hang off that. The other is that we believe in the traditional family. Marriage is a man and a woman. It's not a man and a man or a woman and a woman, or as some countries are trying to introduce polyamorous marriages as well. And you also have polygamous marriages. We don't accept that. It's a man and a woman. And so we would repeal the Same-Sex Marriage Act 2013, because I don't think that children should be deliberately put in a place where they are brought up by same-sex couples. I don't think that's right for children, because children on every measure do better if they are with a married mother and father, their own married mother and father. So that's traditional family values that we stand for. Also, we're a pro-life party, so we're against abortion. We say that life begins at conception, and unborn children have the right to life. So, that would sort of go along with that. And we ask our candidates, if you would vote for those things. You don't have to agree personally. Some people can become candidates, but they say, okay, well, I don't agree with 100% of stuff. They're happy to vote for it, but, and that's fine. Some people don't, but we would expect candidates to vote for those things if they got into parliament. So those are our policies to do with family and nation, of course. I started this in 2020, so Brexit was still pretty much a live issue then. We'd sort of half had it, but it hadn't been done properly. So, what I would say is that we should be fully coming out of all of the influences of the European Union. We're still stuck in a lot of the, programs, de facto stuck in the programs that we had, like the common fisheries policy. We don't have control over our fishing waters. We don't have control over Northern Ireland. Who knows what's going on with the moment with this Windsor agreement that they're talking about. They're selling it to the public, but I think more needs to be done there. And we certainly haven't got control over our borders. Which is deliberate. So, the fake Conservative Party are bringing in tens of thousands of military-aged men every year, and they're not stopping them. But we need to be able to get out of any global compacts, arrangements, and agreements that we are in that stop us from controlling our borders, because you don't have national sovereignty if you can't control your borders. So there's those kind of things that go with nation as well as being proud of your nation. I know there are some bad things in the past, but there's bad things in the past of every nation, but essentially, on balance, we're a good nation, and we should be proud of our culture and our heritage and not destroying it, as some people are actively trying to do by changing roadside names and taking down statues, and also destroying the historic buildings, knocking them down, and then building these hideous carbuncles over the place on programs of densification and intensification around railway hubs that you see, in so many towns and cities now that used to be, pleasant and relaxed and quiet, and are now just these hideous kind of unhuman places with horrible square blocks everywhere. That's destroying the physical fabric of the nation, as well as the culture and the society and the heritage of the nation. So we want to protect that and defend that and rebuild that up again. So, those three words, you can hang the manifesto on that. It's a manifesto of positive principles. And then on that, would our policies would flow from the principles in our manifesto as well.
Well, a very good overview of where you've come from. And again, I've got a lot of thoughts going through my head. So I got questions. Well, just one more question on the party. So what about candidates then? You're setting yourselves up for the May elections coming up. Are you able to tell us how many candidates you're going to put out, and how easy it's been or difficult it's been to get those candidates?
Yeah, the first time we stood was 2 years ago. We had about 30 candidates then. We didn't have as many last year. We had about 20, but there weren't elections in as many places. Now, I can't say exactly how many we're going to have. It will be somewhere in the region of 50 to 100, I think we're going to have this year, maybe more. It depends on how many people apply and, apply to stand over this month, because obviously the nomination period starts around the March the 29th or something, and it ends on the 4th of April. So everyone has to get their nomination papers into the councils by the 4th of April, or you're not on the ballot paper. So there's a change there. So we're still in the process of selecting candidates, approving candidates, and finding spots the candidates want to stand in. So that's ongoing. But all I can say is I'm really happy with the ones that we do have who've come to us already. They're really, really good quality of candidate, and we're going to have them in many, many more places than we did before. And it's we're just building up every year until whenever the next general election happens. And so it depends on people getting involved. That's the thing. So we've had a lot of people come to us, so especially over the last 6 months, and have joined. But a lot of people who've joined us have never been involved in politics before, and it's a big step for people to go from
Mm.
never being involved in politics to joining a party to then standing as a candidate. But what I say to people is just, it's not that hard at local elections. Just go for it. You can be what is colloquially known as a paper candidate, where you just fill in your forms and you don't have to do an awful lot of campaigning. Don't worry about how much time you need to put in. Just stand, because that's a service to people in your area, to give them a chance to vote for somebody who's not Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Green, SNP, who are pushing the globalist agenda. And we can try to get people into our local councils who are on the side of the people. So, it's a big step for people, but people are taking that step, and I encourage everyone to go and do that.
This is a really good point that you are encouraging, and I'd imagine giving a little bit of teaching to people
Mm.
to say, if you want to get involved if you want to get involved and you want to get involved in politics, you've got to understand a bit about the procedures. My personal experience, and I'm smiling, laughing at myself really as I say this, is that I first of all became a parish councillor, and that was some friends said to me one day, "Oh, do you know that they're looking for a parish councillor, and you'd be good. We think you'd be good, and why don't you give it a go?" And so I experienced the thrill of parish elections. I got myself elected onto the parish council, and then it got very interesting because I found that I had access to documents that were provided by the uh, so we got the parish council, and then you've got your local district council. So documents were provided by the district council, which I probably would never have seen. It was only being there on the parish council and getting documents about transport and house building and a number of other publications that I started to think to myself, well, actually, there's a bit more to this than I thought. So
Mm.
I can say I learned a lot from, I think I was a parish councillor for 6 years. And then my joke is that, of course, most of what you get is complaints and problems and why don't you sort this out? So I did my best to sort out some problems. I certainly had some success with at that stage in my village, we didn't have a pavement the full length of the village, even though
Mm.
traffic was getting heavier. And one of the things that I was able to achieve was a pavement from one end of the village to the other, which was wide enough for pushchairs and prams. And we also had some safer crossings put in. So I am able to say I achieved some things, but in 6 years, I had a lot of letters which were a pack of trouble, some of them a bit hostile, but I
Mm.
did get one thank you letter. So my response to you is I learned a lot from getting involved. And then that led ultimately to me ultimately standing as an independent candidate, uh, as a parliamentary candidate um, in Plymouth. And whilst I can't remember how many votes I got, I think about I think it was 232 or something like that.
Mm.
We did a lot of canvassing work. And the next morning, after the election, I was having a coffee, feeling very tired and a bit depressed because I knew that I'd only got that couple of hundred votes. And a person called me and said, "How are you this morning, Brian?" And I said, "A bit tired and a bit down." She said, "Why are you down?" And I said, "Well, obviously I didn't get elected." And he said, "Yeah, but do you know the news?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't know the final result." And he said, "Well, Linda Gilroy, Labour, lost her seat and the Lib Dem got in." This was
Mm.
the seat that I was applying for. And he said, "You are the most hated man in Plymouth because everybody believes that you disrupted the normal flow of the elections and hence Labour lost the seat." And this taught me something else, that even when you think you haven't made an impact, you might well have. So I'm going to reflect back to you. Well done for encouraging people to get involved. But here's a difficult question for you. What do you say to people who are perhaps new? They're just hearing about the Heritage Party, and they say, "Well, the trouble is, David, that really nobody knows about the Heritage Party. So what do you think you're going to be able to do? You're so small." How do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I get asked that kind of question quite a lot. But the thing is, we're new as well. So it's early days yet. We've been going 2.5 years. And, some of the other parties that we now know are household names. UKIP obviously rose and then fell again, but it got to its height between 2012 and 2016. It was very successful in that period. I mean, it started in 1993. So it took about 20 years to get to the point where they were having the impact. And, arguably, they were responsible for the biggest shift in politics ever in living memory with winning the referendum, fighting for it, getting it, winning it. And sadly they're gone, but they did have a massive impact. I want to do more than just have an impact on the other two parties. I'm aiming over the long term to grow and be a party that can stand everywhere and will take seats. And hopefully in the long term or medium term, we can be the party of government, because I think that we are in a unique time now where people are just getting to the point where they're absolutely fed up of both the fake conservatives, who are not conservative, and the Labour Party, because they don't represent the labouring man. And they're just interested in wokery and transgenderism and all this kind of stuff. And they're both acting together to ruin our energy infrastructure and make energy costs more for businesses and households in the name of climate alarmism. And that just is completely out of touch with ordinary people who just want to get on with their lives, be able to pay their bills, look after their families, do their business, and get on with things without government interfering. So I think we're nearing a point which is going to be a real interesting turning point in politics in this country, where people will abandon all of the previous parties and look for something new. And we're here with positive principles to restore our nation and build up our nation again. So, yeah, we're small at the moment, but you know what? Oak trees grow out of acorns, don't they? They start small and then they grow and then they become the biggest tree in the forest. And also, David beat Goliath. You can say it's like David and Goliath, but David won. And I'm David. So, so we are maybe small at the moment, but we are growing and we've got some fantastic people. Every year we're standing more candidates, and we aim to make a difference. And if you don't try, you're not going to succeed. So I would
Yeah.
say be positive, look at what we've done so far, and look at what we can achieve in the future, rather than saying, oh, you're too small to do anything. Join us and help us grow.
Okay, and of course, one of the things is that just to say, UKIP didn't actually achieve an MP, if I remember correctly, did they? And this is something that I thought was always a shame for the amount of effort put in,
Mm.
because even one MP asking the right questions in Westminster becomes a force to be reckoned with, I think. So, yes, okay, I take that. And the next thing that occurs to me is that you're being pretty upfront, obviously, in your policies. And there's some of these policies that, to the establishment at large at the moment, these have got a big black spot against them. It's very difficult to talk about matters black and white, cultural issues. It's difficult to talk about immigration. It's certainly difficult at the moment to talk about, um, uh, is it just a man and a woman that should be married? And you've come straight in with these topics. What sort of reaction are you getting? I can say from two areas. What sort of reaction are you getting to these policies from the media? And the other one is what sort of reactions are you getting from, I'll call it, the political, the lower level political establishment? And by that, I would be saying, are you getting any feel for how you're seen by city councils or district councils, county councils? How are people reacting to your policies?
I think the most reaction I got was back when I was on the London Assembly, because then I was elected to something. So you get more attention from the media when you're in an elected position. And they hated what I would say. They would just smear me as a homophobe or a bigot or an anti vaxxer or a conspiracy theorist all the time. Now I'm against escalating war in Ukraine. I get called a Putin puppet, or they make up new smears every year for the latest thing. But Yeah, I remember one time in the London Assembly where there was a motion um, pro, uh, proposed by a Labour Assembly member to support LGBT relationships and sex education in primary schools. And they all supported it except me. And I just stood up and I gave a speech and I said, I don't think this is right. There's Christian parents against it. There's Muslim parents against it. There's Jewish parents against it. We need to respect those groups and people who don't want this. And we should allow parents to be the primary educators of their children. And one by one, they all got up and condemned me and they clapped each other for speaking against me. I mean, there was a Labour person, a Green person, a Tory person. They all stood up one after the other to speak against me. And, you know, they were united in condemning me for having the wrong opinion. They were really, really viscerally emotionally attacking me. So it wasn't irrational. The speeches they gave weren't rational; they were very visceral. So you could see this when I just stood up for traditional family values. You know, when I first said this, it was in 2017, and yeah, there was an article about me in Pink News, which was picked up by the Sun and the Mirror, and they were all sort of saying, "Oh, here's someone with homophobic views," you know. So that's the kind of thing you get. But I think now, because I'm known for saying this and standing for this, at the moment the mainstream media just seems to ignore me and doesn't really say much about what I say, you know, and just leaves me alone, because I'd always give a good account and a good reason for, you know, why I have these policies and why I have these views. And I also say, well, you know, all the other parties stand for those things. Voters need a choice. So I'm giving people a choice to vote for a socially conservative party, because if someone wants to vote for that, they don't have the choice, because the
Yeah.
Conservatives are not socially conservative, they're socially liberal, the same as Labour, Lib Dem, SNP, and the Greens. You know, you got the problem at the moment. You can see Kate Forbes, you know, who's also a Christian. I'm a Christian. She's a Christian, which, you know, has these points of view, and she's getting hounded at the moment by the other people in her party and the mainstream media. And I relate to that, because that's what happened to me in 2017, 2018, 2019. But it doesn't happen as much at the moment. But I think if we started to win seats, then, you know, the mainstream media would come back and have another go again. But I'll be ready for them.
Do you have any interaction or feedback from this? I'm particularly talking about local council level here, because one of the things that I learned, and I'm sure Plymouth isn't different, is that local politics is actually pretty dirty. If people think all of the dirt exists at high level with national politics, that dirt infests county councils, city councils, and local district councils. Some of it is quite poisonous. So my mind says, have they already got their talons sharpened to come after you, or are they also leaving you alone at the moment?
I think at the moment most people are leaving us alone, because you know, we're not standing yet in all local councils. So there's some places where we're not seen as a threat to them yet. There are some where we are, you know, where we're going to stand a number of councillors this year. So people are sizing us up and getting a little bit worried about the challenge that we're going to bring in certain councils. You know, we're going to stand quite a few candidates in Devon, quite a few candidates in Surrey and Sussex and so on. So I think there, some of them might be a little bit more worried about what we're going to do in the challenge that we bring. But on the other hand, we do have some people that, you know, were in the Conservative Party or are still in the Conservative Party and really hate it. They really absolutely hate what they're doing and where they're going. And they're looking at us and they really like what we're about and what we say and our policies and our principles and our manifesto. You know, we've had already a couple of people have come over who have left the Conservative Party and want to join us. And we've got a number of other people who've said, well, we're thinking about it, you know, but they're still, you know, hanging on, hoping for the Conservative Party to change. I say, look, it's not going to change. So, you know, some of them are thinking of coming over. So we get those two different reactions. But local politics, I think what people really don't like is that we are for stopping lots of big planning developments. I mean, we want to maintain our heritage, the beautiful historic character of our cities and towns, and protect our countryside. So we would be against these huge development schemes that seem to go on, from which I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of local councillors benefit from with brown envelopes. Obviously, I don't know any specific examples, but this stuff goes on, and we would be a challenge to that. So I think some people are not going to like that. If we come along and say, no, we're not going to let these developments happen. We're going to protect our farmland. We're going to protect our historic buildings, and we're not going to allow loads of developments to take place, because we're for our heritage and not for people making a quick buck.
When anybody stands up to challenge what's happening, particularly if they challenge what they believe to be wrong, what immediately happens is, in my experience, is a big pushback, and you really have to fight hard before other people will come out of the woodwork to say, "Yeah, actually, I think you're right, and I'm going to support you." So I think where we're getting to is, yeah, politics is a very tough business, and
Mhm.
it's not for the faint-hearted. If you want to make a difference and get involved, wherever you decide to get involved, you're going to have to fight your corner very hard. You've obviously got the advantage, David, of this experience with UKIP and getting up to the top of the tree with UKIP and your experience in London, and I would feel that's helped you tremendously. You've been bold today because you're speaking to us with a very clean background. You've got a white screen, but you've also put up the national flag, and of course,
Oh,
this for a lot of mainstream journalists is a rag to the bull. I spent 21 years in Her Majesty's Armed Forces in the Navy, and that meant that very often at 8 o'clock in the morning, I was stood on the deck of a ship saluting the flag in due respect to the monarchy and my country. And I've always found it extremely hard that we now find ourselves living in a country where to show respect to the national flag is an indication, as far as the BBC is concerned, again, that you're sorry, as far as the BBC is concerned, that you're a right wing extremist. Now, you're obviously not squeamish about that charge, but you've come in and you've got I'll call it the Union Jack over your left shoulder there. Tell us, do you have to think about doing this, or you simply have decided you're not going to be intimidated?
I've done this for a few years, actually. I first put a flag up behind where I did videos in my last place I lived. It's sort of 4 years ago. I just don't understand it. I really don't understand why people associate the our national flag with being far right or whatever. I just simply don't get it. But then you have periods where even the Labour Party, when they come to a campaign, they'll all stand in front of the flag, and it's like, oh, it's okay now, isn't it? When they do it, but when someone on the right does it, then apparently you're all these kind of things, bigoted and so on, that they say, and racist and whatever. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, what other country would say, oh, if you stand in front of your flag, then that's racist? They wouldn't say that in France or America or Russia or China or Kenya or Nigeria. Everyone's happy to stand in front of their flag. But it's just this country, it seems, that you got the media trying to say that that's something morally dubious to do. Honestly, I just don't understand it. Really, genuinely don't get it. And so I just think, well, I'm going to do it anyway because I love my country. I want to restore it. I think we got a great future if we can turn things around from the managed decline and the decay that we've had under the parties that we've had in Parliament for the last 25 years or so. We have a great people, a wonderful people, and all people really need, well, half of what people need is just for the government to get out of the way and let them be proud of their country and build up their country again. So, this is part of the deliberate talking down of our culture and our nation to sort of make people ashamed of our country and ashamed of our flag when we got a lot to be proud of and a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with that. I'd just add that I've been to the United States a few times, most recently to visit family members. And if you walk around a residential area, very common to see the United States flag
Mm.
flying, above somebody's doorway. And they
Mm.
take it unbelievably seriously. You're advised not to go mocking the fact that people, across a normal residential area will be flying the national flag. But somebody's poisoned our view of our own identity in this country, as you say, that if you dare to fly a Union Jack, that automatically makes you some sort of extreme racist. Now, you just said on the back of that comment from me, you just said we need to we need to change the government, and this is really getting down into the meat of it. I, what do you think? There's a problem in this country. I don't want to put words in your mouth. There's a problem in this country. What are we actually facing? What is the problem in UK in 2023? Why have we got all these problems across so many areas? Whether it's the NHS or it's jobs or it's the roads are falling to pieces or the rail infrastructure doesn't work or children are being taught by drag queens or we can't even define a woman. What on
Mm.
earth has happened to this country? What do you think the problem is?
Yeah, like you say, we're sort of fighting 20 different battles which are visible that we can see on every kind of level. Like, the drag queens, the attack on marriage, the attack on masculinity, the immigration, the climate alarmism, the escalation of war in Ukraine. All these are things that are happening that are ruining our country and the structure of our country. But what's behind it, I think there's maybe two or three different things that are interlinked. One of them is cultural Marxism, and I spoke about this a lot back in 2017, 2018. And so, the understanding, people understand that there's something very, very wrong with our society, and free speech is going, but are not really sure what it is. But cultural Marxism is a deliberate plan to infiltrate all of the institutions that we have and invert their values and principles. So whereas before you might have had, universities, a lot of them were founded, hundreds of years ago, and for years and years they taught Christianity, they taught divinity. That was their main subject. That when the Enlightenment happened, they started teaching about natural sciences and physical sciences. That's great, but now they've been repurposed to teach about social justice and how there's all these groups of oppressed people, and we need to change society and fight those people that are perceived to be in power and therefore oppressive. So they are fighting. So they're saying women are oppressed by men. Black people are oppressed by white people. Gays are oppressed by Christians. Trans people are oppressed by everybody. Migrants are oppressed by the indigenous population. So then there's all these power structures that they invent and say, well, we need to destroy the white supremacy. We need to destroy, smash heteronormativity and smash the patriarchy and so on in order to bring about social justice. So that's cultural Marxism in a nutshell, and sees society as inherently unjust, even though it isn't, and then tries to invert everything, and that corrodes society and collapses it from within. But then, added to that, now I think people have got the understanding that there are these very, very powerful groups of people who are pulling the strings economically as well, in things like the World Economic Forum, and then even behind them, the big global hedge funds like BlackRock and Vanguard, and who knows who owns those companies. And they're interested in totally collapsing societies and getting rid of nation states, so they can introduce a one world government system with just a few corporations, and they can control everything and get all the money and get all the resources for themselves. So I think that goes along with cultural Marxism, which actually, is based on the Communist Manifesto. Obviously, Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto, they say they want to get rid of three things. They want to get rid of families, they want to get rid of nations, they want to get rid of private property. Those are the things that the Communist Manifesto talks against. Cultural Marxism was there to slowly corrode the West because there was a lot of resistance to Marxism. That's now almost run its course. And now the people who are the actual Marxists, who want to actually get rid of families, nations, and private property and take all the private property for themselves, are showing their hand. And so we can see that much more obviously now with the World Economic Forum and such groups and their plans to introduce total surveillance over the whole globe with central bank digital currencies, which will be controlled by the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, ultimately, that will control everything. So there are those sort of two aspects that are sort of now coming together. I'm still trying to work it all out, but there are definitely some people who are actively trying to collapse our nation from inside, not just our nation, but all the nations around the world.
David, I'd certainly agree with you on that. And I can say I've been speaking out on this angle for probably nearly 20 years. And in
Mm.
fact, it's getting easier and easier to demonstrate to people that we are being attacked from the inside. What came into my mind as you were talking then was, of course, the World Economic Forum put out a little document and video only a few months ago when it was suggesting that in the future you would own nothing and be happy. So mantras like that have not been created by very powerful organizations such as the World Economic Forum for nothing. The mantras being created in order to try and steer people's minds in order to accept what's coming. And as Mike Robinson has pointed out many occasions, when Mark Carney was head of the Bank of England, he was busy saying if companies don't adopt their green agenda, they will be put out of business. He was as aggressive as this. So we see these agencies having more and more power, whether it's the World Economic Forum, could be the Bilderbergers, although they seem to have slipped into the background a little bit. But we've even got the situation that at the recent Davos meeting, or shortly after the recent Davos meeting, Keir Starmer was being interviewed by Emily Maitland from the BBC. And she said to him, well, you've been to Davos, um, how does it compare to Westminster? And his response was, well, Westminster's a poisonous debating um, pond in which nothing's really achieved. And so she comes back very quickly and says, so which is it, Davos or Westminster? And the leader of the Labour Party says
Mm.
Davos because I'm dealing with people and I can get things done. But what Keir Starmer is talking about is acting um, completely out of the constitutional constraints on him as an MP. He's abandoning his constituents to whom he should owe his real allegiance and saying, well, I'm going to work with the big boys in the World Economic Forum, Davos, in order to achieve what I think is right. So this is reality that you're talking about. This is not a fanciful thing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely appalling that he would say that and even think of saying that. When I was speaking to the BBC, and obviously he knows that millions of people are going to listen to him, and he's just so blatantly coming out and saying, "Yeah, I prefer Davos." Well, I'm sure it's very nice for him because all these people, they go and they have nice meals and nice hotels and nice conference centres, and mix with other people who have got the same agenda. Away from all the riffraff. They don't have to cope with anyone who disagrees with them or have all these nasty opinions, like there's marriage is a man and a woman, for example, or we should allow people to carry on using their petrol and diesel cars, and who disagree with all this climate agenda nonsense and central bank digital currency that they want to bring in, who still want to keep on using cash because we will still want our freedoms. And it just shows the absolute disdain that they have for ordinary people, that they live in this nice little elite world where they meet, and then they think that they can direct the course of life for the 99.9% of the world's population that aren't involved in this little elite group that they're part of. It's just absolutely terrible that this is going on. But as you said, this goes against our constitution. It goes against, they don't have the right to do this. There is nothing, in our constitution that says that any foreign, well, our constitution says, it's in the Act of Settlement, isn't it, that no foreign power should have any sort of say in
Say,
our
yeah.
nation whatsoever. I can't remember the exact words, but it's there. I got that slightly wrong. But no power should be given to any foreign prince, prelate power, or principality, something like that. So that includes the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the European Union, the World Health Organization, even NATO. We shouldn't be giving away any power to any of these organizations, that they should be able to tell us what we can and cannot do as a nation in any sense whatsoever, either in full or in parts. But this just goes totally against that. And it should not be happening. So that's why I say we need a change of government. And so we need to sweep away all of these other parties that are all signed up to Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and all these programs that all these supranational agencies are involved in pushing, and get a party in Parliament which will be for the nation and for the people again, for the riffraff, and rather than as they would see it. Not that I see it, but that's how those people in the World Economic Forum would see who the people are, how the people are.
You can identify um, the source of the problem within, are we allowed to call them the globalists, the likes of Bill Gates, that seems to be able to mince in and out of number 10 as he pleases, whether he's talking to Boris Johnson as was Prime Minister, or he's talking to Tony Blair. We have these unaccountable globalists, many of them with immense wealth, who seem to have a very polite language, inappropriate influence on national policy within the UK.
They seem to actually think that they do rule the world because they've got a lot of money. I've spoken to people who are involved, in the sort of financial investment banking services industry. They actually genuinely do believe that they control everything, that they can move money around, and they can force Latvia to do something, or they can do this, and that's going to force Sri Lanka to do this. They do actually think that they have the right to tell national governments what their policy should be, but they don't, and we, the people, have got to stand up and say, no, we're not having this anymore. But yeah, it's just appalling. As you say, these people swan into London, then they go over to Berlin, and then they go to Rome, and they seem to tell the people there what the next thing on the agenda is that they have to do. And then you see different governments acting in concert, in lockstep together. This was something that people noticed really in the lockdown. That this was being brought in at exactly the same time in Canada, in the UK, in Germany, in New Zealand. All these things sort of seem to happen at exactly the same time. They even use the same language and the same phrases. You know, you've probably mentioned this, that the whole build back better thing, that people don't say that much anymore, but there was suddenly a week when everyone was starting to say this like it was a new spell, a new phrase that they were putting out into the consciousness to try to get people to accept something, all at the same time. So yeah, this is going on. It's very clear now. It's very obvious. It's not conspiracy theory because it's right out in the open, so everyone can see it. And you know, as it's there, it's easier for people to say, "Look, do we want this? No, we don't. Let's vote for somebody in Parliament that can overturn this and get our nation back."
A really crunchy question. David, you've been elected Prime Minister. What would you go for initially? How would you attempt to sort out the mess in this country?
There's so many things to be done very, very quickly. But obviously, we'd have a program for the first 100 days. And what we'd want to do is stop the migration across the channel. We'd stop, get some grappling hooks, push the boats back to France. We would stop RSE going into schools, and we would stop this brainwashing of children, which is going on, and all the drag queen story hours and all this kind of filth that's going to children. We'd stop that. We would get the budget back on track and stop wasting money on all kinds of things like subsidies for wind and solar and HS2 and foreign aid and migrant hotels, and actually use the money to be building up the schools and the police and health service. So we need to turn the budget around very, very quickly. We would need to start rebuilding our energy infrastructure as well, and part of that would be to one of the first things we'd have to do would be to repeal the Climate Change Act and all this net zero nonsense. So then there would be no obligation on any councils to put in policies and their plans which are going to go along with net zero. So we would start to then use our coal and oil and gas resources to bring the price of energy back down, which in turn would feed into building up businesses. It would lower costs for households, so the economy would start to grow again because of that. And we would also remove the crazy sanctions we've got on Russia. Which actually are not hurting Russia, but they're hurting the West more than anything, so that we can get cheap Russian gas for in the short term while we build our energy infrastructure to rebuild our economy over the medium term. And along with that, we would need to, do the other things that I think we need to do socially. I mean, there are two things. As I said, we are a socially conservative party, and a couple of the things we would want to do quite quickly is restore marriage to being a man and a woman, and to abolish abortion, whereby 220,000 unborn children every year are killed in this country, which is a horrible Holocaust, and we would want to stop that quite quickly as well. So those would be some of the things that we would do in our first 100 days.
You quickly and appropriately, because family is a key part. You've said family is one of the three key areas for the Heritage Party. So you're focusing in on some quite simple, controversial, but simple things within society. Um, Language is certainly being attacked at the moment, and
Mm.
I'm old enough now to think back, and let's say to the 80s. If I go back in the 80s, was life different? It was definitely calmer. People weren't
Mm.
worried what sex they were; they automatically knew, and therefore they could get on with their jobs. They weren't worried about pronouns and this sort of thing. So I find it interesting that you're saying your 100 days, you're going to concentrate on some really quite simple issues as a way of starting to pick away at the bigger problems. And
Mm.
you've also mentioned Russia, and I thought, oh, well, this is interesting because I can imagine a sucking of teeth in the BBC. How do you view the war in Ukraine? That's a major event at the moment.
There's a good thing, isn't it? If the BBC is for something, it's a good indication that what they're saying is wrong, and the opposite opinion to the BBC is correct. I mean, I've been saying from the beginning, this is crazy. This is a war that didn't need to ever happen, but the West has been pushing it because we have been arming the Azov battalion, etc., the Ukrainian forces for 8 years, and enabling them to kill and shell ethnic Russians in the Donbass region for 8 years, breaking the Minsk agreements, which were put in place in 2014 in order to secure a peace and a stability in Ukraine after the Western backed and instigated coup that they had in 2013, 2014. So I'm against escalating this. It's something that NATO countries didn't even need to get involved in. I mean, it was essentially a special military operation to stop Russians being killed in eastern Ukraine. But the West has escalated and escalated. You had crazy statements at the beginning by Liz Truss saying that she would support British people going out and fighting in Ukraine. I mean, where on earth was that coming from? But it's just escalated. Now they're talking about tanks. Now they're talking about airplanes. Rishi Sunak's talking about giving the UK is going to be the first country to give Ukraine long-range missiles, which could potentially shoot into Russia itself. I mean, where do they want to go with this? It looks like they actually want a hot war with Russia, which is insane. So, from the very beginning, I've been saying de-escalate, talk, negotiate, end the war, end the killing, stop imposing sanctions. Let's just get back to sanity and where we were 10 years ago, where the Western countries and Russia were building a good relationship and building trade and building friendship with each other. Where's that gone? For what reason? For what purpose has this gone? It's the wrong future for the world, for the West to be enemies with Russia. We need to be, get back to being partners, trading partners with Russia, if not friends. That's what I think, anyway.
Well, of course, the policy's all gone, or the policy's been skewed in the minds of the globalists that we've just mentioned, I think. But that's a pretty powerful response there, and I don't think many people could disagree with the concept that we need to wind the war down and stop the killing. I would hope that all of our viewers and listeners would agree with that. We're just coming up to the hour, David. So you've got the audience. What would you like to say to the audience? Give them the pitch. Why should UK column viewers or other people that come across this video, why should they get involved with the Heritage Party?
Well, we do have a full manifesto, which you can see. We started up, was it 2.5 years ago, when there was nothing going on in this sort of area of politics. And so we started up because we need a party that's socially conservative, that stands for our nation, restoring our nation, family values and freedom, and we encompass all of those things together. But I can only build this with the help of an army of people. So I'm hoping that people watching this and who see me around on social media will join the Heritage Party, because everyone who joins, it helps me and it helps the candidates that we have to continue standing in elections and fighting elections and giving people an alternative that is not Tory, Labour, Lib Dem and Green. So if we don't make a challenge politically, we're going to keep on getting the same thing that we've always had before, and the same parties that are running our nation down. So please do come and join me in the Heritage Party. And if you're a member, you can also apply to become a candidate as well. And this really is the time this month to make a decision as to whether to become a candidate or not, because you've got to get your papers into the council by the end of March, essentially, for the elections in May. So this is election season. Now is the best time to join us, to get involved in the party, to get involved in the candidates, be a candidate, support candidates, help to make the change in politics that you want to see in the country. Thank you. And you can join us at heritageparty.org if you like.
It's been a pleasure to speak to you today. So I'm going to wish you success, and I shall watch carefully and see how it goes.